You're listening to Everything You Think You Know Is Wrong. My goal is to help individuals like you explore various ways to fully transform your life from the inside out. I'm so excited to have Emily Cassel on the show today. Emily is a soulful business and leadership coach for women entrepreneurs. She's a podcast host, an international retreat leader, and a champion of women. She believes that your big, crazy dream is totally possible. So do I. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm here today with Emily Cassel, and we're going to be talking about what to do in the middle of this crisis, especially if you're a business owner. We're all stressed out. We're all trying to keep it together, and we're worried about our money and our business and our health and all the things that come with a crisis like this. So I felt like Emily would be an amazing guest to speak to other women and, well, people in general that are just worried about their businesses. Thanks for coming on the show, Emily.
You're welcome. I'm so excited to be here and to be able to connect during this time and really support people with navigating it, because it's not easy. And I know that the work that you do and what you teach and talk about is what is going to help prepare people to deal with this time better, and be in that state of surrender and possibility, but also it feels very real and scary for a lot of people right now. And we're all feeling the anxiety in some way.
Yeah, we are. And I keep telling, my friends and family, just people that I'm talking to every day, like, it's not that you are only feeling this anxiety. You're feeling like the collective consciousness. It's everywhere. You can't escape it because it's like it's worldwide now.
Yeah.
So with this many people feeling anxious, especially if you're sensitive, you are definitely going to pick up on that. So sometimes you have to tell yourself, like, it's not me, because 9 times out of 10, it probably isn't.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like right now what's also happening on the flip side of that is, like, we're all feeling this collective anxiety. We all have this thing in common right now, whether it's anxiety or fear or just the reality that this is what's happening right now for all of us as a global community. And I think we rarely share something at the same exact moment in time that feels just the same level of pressing or the same level of fear. And I think it's really actually like reuniting a lot of us back to like that we are actually one, that we are a global community of humans, and that we are struggling with things that Italians are struggling with, and Iranians, and every walk of life right now is affected by this in one way or another, whether they have a ton of cases and they've had a ton of deaths, or just because it's affecting their economy and people aren't traveling as much or whatever. So it's really interesting, actually. I'm seeing a lot of like really cool silver linings from a spiritual perspective right now. Like, I just keep getting more of them every day that I'm recognizing. And it's interesting. And at the same time, of course, like, I don't want to not acknowledge the fact that the fear, the anxiety, those other pieces are so valid. And of course, we're feeling that way right now. Of course, we're all going through it.
Yeah. And you can't tell someone, that's completely freaking out, like, well, there's good happening. Don't worry about it. Calm down. I mean, they have to work through it themselves. But I think for a lot of us, we are seeing the good in this. Like, I keep thinking to myself that a lot of people might say to themselves, I like being at home. I like cooking at home every day. I like not having plans, 5 days a week. It goes back to the interview that I did on your show about slow living and taking it down a notch. It's so good for us. And now we're being forced to do that. And I feel like some people might kind of in a weird way like that reality. They weren't given a chance to do that before, because we all have such packed lives. I mean, I made a conscious effort to do that, but now it's being forced on us to live that way. And it could be an eye-opener for a lot of people, which would be a silver lining in my book.
Yeah, totally. I think the amount of space we have right now is either going to make people super uncomfortable because, of course, we have a fear of that. I know when I was first starting, like really my own personal development journey in a deeper way than I had before, aside from reading books, but actually like receiving support from a coach, I realized that I had filled every little crevice of my whole life. And like, I really had no time. I was busy all the time. I always had something, back-to-back appointments. I always had my hands in something or was wanting to learn something else, just like filling this space.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my coach at the time said something to me like, what are you afraid will come up when you actually have the space to feel it or remember it or recognize it or process it or address it?
Mm-hmm.
Because often the busyness and the packing our schedules so tight and our lives so tightly is really about finding, like, that's a way of coping almost with stuff that we don't want to deal with or we don't want to feel. We're shoving or pushing or hiding or contorting or doing something to manipulate the feeling versus just feeling it. And I think right now as a collective, we all are getting this gift of space to really see what comes up for us. Because if you're not already doing that, and if you're not someone who is actively giving yourself that and creating that, it's unlikely that you're going to do it unless it's forced upon you. So I feel like we're getting a consciousness upgrade, which a lot of people obviously have been saying, like, it's time, the feminine is rising, all these predictions and forecasts of like, we're going to have this big spiritual awakening on a collective level. And I feel like this is definitely part of it. And yet,
Absolutely.
Of course, it has to be this like dramatic and this traumatic for everyone to really actually get it.
But like this show and my next book and all of it, it's all about spiritual transformation. And I know in my life, like, it took a lot of pain to have that breakthrough. It's like you have to go through hell to get to heaven in a way. So that's what it kind of feels like now on a global level. And it feels familiar to me because I've already been here in my own life. And we all will go through this. We'll lose someone that we love. We'll get divorced, we'll get fired, we'll lose our money. It happens to all of us. And it's a way to raise your level of consciousness to have that breakthrough. Because when you're like, walking on easy street and everything's fine all the time, that's great, but there's not a lot of growth in that.
Right.
It takes, like, sometimes you need a slap upside the head to wake up to, like, wait a second, I don't want to live like that anymore. It's not working for me.
Yeah.
But there's growing pains in that. And back to what you were talking about, that now we have all this time to think about, what's really going on. These emotions are coming up, old thoughts, feelings, like, it's intense. And people are feeling that. But it also shows you how strong you can be, because you will make it through it. You will.
Yes. And I think that's the other thing is, like, we are becoming so much more resilient through this, whether we recognize it or not. We're learning new tools and coping mechanisms and how to slow down and how to be still and know and hear those callings come up or hear those messages come through in a different way. And most people won't allow that to happen. So it sort of makes sense that we would need something like this. Also, I'm noticing just in my own sphere of women entrepreneurs or aspiring women entrepreneurs, there have been a lot of people who are using this time to, like, finally start that business, or finally, maybe they got let go or laid off from a job and they're like, well, great, I was thinking about leaving anyway to really go double down on my side hustle and make it full time. And it's really interesting to see that. And I'm also seeing the business owners who are struggling the most are the ones who have been resistant to diversifying and creating their business in a really sustainable way, where they have virtual offerings and digital products and different ways of reaching people than just like a physical brick and mortar. And I have a lot of people that I work with right now who are brick and mortar. And so that's an interesting thing for them and an interesting edge. And it's really cool because they've actually been talking about it or thinking about it, and they haven't done it yet. Like, they've been thinking, oh, I should do this virtually, or I should have this kind of thing, or I want to create a passive income source, or I want to do something. And now it's like, okay, well, the time is suddenly right now. So figure it out and get it done and, like, up level.
Yeah. And I've seen people, coffee shops, stores,
Hmm.
just on social media get so creative on how to
Yes.
continue selling their products.
Yeah.
More engaged than I've ever seen them before. So
Yes.
you have to get creative when times get rough like that. And
Right.
back to the idea of like starting a project or really diving in. I know if you're super anxious, like it's hard to do that. But on the flip side, like for me, this is an example. I was like, okay, you know what? I have two different careers. Like I'm a writer and I'm also in real estate. The real estate has stopped right now. It's
Mhm.
temporary. I know that, but I'm taking the opportunity to like work on my next book because I'm never going to ever have this much time. And by doing that, it's taken my mind off of like all the madness that's happening. That
Yes.
in and turning off the news. Like
Mm.
those two things have helped me tremendously
Yeah.
because, you know, it's just going to keep you on a loop of fear. So if you could dive into something that's like going to be part of your future and you're interested in it and it's a creative process, that is going to help you tremendously.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I also have been noticing like what's the number one excuse that we always make as humans for why we're not doing something that we want to do or that we know we should be doing that's good for us, right? I don't have enough time. Well, now nobody can use that excuse. So it's
No.
sort of this perfect opportunity like, okay, well, let's get real. What are you telling yourself normally you don't have enough time to do that you actually do want to do? Is it like getting in 3 yoga classes a week, or is it like reading a book front to back on a Saturday? Is it something, it's just all these little things. And I've noticed even for myself, for whatever reason, right, when it's able to be so full and so busy, that I have a hard time, as we all do, even though I know this and this is what I teach, and like energetic sustainability for women entrepreneurs is my jam, and that includes slowing down and working with cycles and all of that. But even so, even if you live and breathe it, it's still hard as a human. It can be really challenging when the world around you is moving so quickly and everything is busy and you have 10 social invitations and obligations and things that you've said yes to. And it just gets so full. And so I even have a hard time like actually opening a book and sitting there and reading it.
Yeah,
Instead I'm
we're
like, oh,
surrounded.
audiobook.
Right. No, it's just there's so many distractions in the
Mm-hmm.
world. And for the creative person or the person really trying to go all in on a project, it's poison, all those distractions. It
Yes.
is taking you away from like why you were put on this earth. And that is way more important than like going to 3 dinner parties in a week.
Yeah.
You have to make a decision like this is important to me and I have to sacrifice. And you
Mm-hmm.
might have to sacrifice a lot. I've had
Mm-hmm.
to sacrifice in my life for these things that are super important to me. But at the end of the day, I know that's why I'm here. And so that takes like the number one position. And
Mm-hmm.
that makes me feel fulfilled. And I don't know, it's worth it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It's
Yeah.
worth it. The socializing and, you know, all the stuff that's out there for us to do, that's not going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be there, but sometimes you got to take a time out and just
Mm-hmm.
focus on what you want to accomplish. And I promise you will grow tremendously if you really like go all in and finish a project. And that sense of fulfillment, it's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you've been feeling this in your circle online or not, but I've also been feeling like the first week of this lockdown, quarantine, whatever we're calling it, I started feeling actually really overwhelmed because there were so many things that people were offering all of a sudden. It was like free
Yeah.
yoga and free meditations and this healing and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God, there's too much. Like, how can I do it all? Like, oh my God, everyone is doing this
They
right now.
are.
And I'm like, oh, I'm just feeling like, first of all, if that's what you're feeling, whoever's listening right now, if that's what you're feeling pressured to do because you're seeing it everywhere and you're like, oh my gosh, got to keep up, got to put out a free offering. You don't also need to create, or you don't need to turn yourself into like a content creating machine, doing everything for free, working 24/7 during this time either. It doesn't have to look like that to just show up and be present and available and of service as a leader right now. That's actually not serving you or anyone to be depleted and overdoing it either. And it's like, okay, let's look at that pattern, because it's the same thing that we're being asked not to do right now. And yet there's so much, like, there can be so much noise as well during this time, even on good things, right? Like even around meditations and healings and yoga. Like if you're feeling like you should be doing all of it and you're feeling pressure that you're not in every moment, because there are so many options that you don't really have a quote unquote excuse not to, like that's also not what needs to be happening right now. And you also don't need to write, you know, your next best-selling book if that doesn't feel the best.
Right. I mean, if you're
right now,
you cannot do it, then don't. These were like decisions that I made, but I know exactly what you're saying. But I think that's really about staying with like the business of being busy. Like they have not everyone has switched gears yet. I've been training myself to live like this for a long time.
Me too.
So it's hard to just like turn it off. You know, it is being forced on people, but you know, maybe it's going to be a month of staying at home, 2 months.
Right.
I don't know what this is going to look like, but I know at some point the lights come on and you're like, you know, I feel pretty good being this calm and living like a slower type lifestyle. And it is the opposite of most people, but I know it's good for our nervous systems because I've been on both sides of the coin. And, you know, for me, I was like, I'm just going to make people laugh. So if I need to put a meme up of Kermit, like dancing after 8 bottles of wine to Fleetwood Mac, okay, this is funny. Or I like seeing just like what my friends are doing at home. It makes me feel like light. It's not anything like, you got to take this class. And that's the decision I made. So I just wanted to keep things light because everything feels so heavy right now.
Yeah.
I wanted to also ask you, I was reading on your website about how you took a positive psychology class and like everything changed for you. So what did that look like?
Yeah. Well, you know, as a psych major going into university, I was like trying to find my thing, you know, the thing that really lit me up. And before that, the reason I chose psychology was because I was really interested in nutrition and well-being and happiness and like what actually leads to fulfillment and also success. Like what are the spiritual laws of success and what are those other types of, you know, not necessarily like how do you make millions of dollars from a financial standpoint, but just like what actually leads people to be successful. And if making $1 million is a byproduct of that, great. If it's like, you know, something else, awesome. If it's healing the world or doing something really amazing that feels fulfilling, great. So I was curious about all of these things. And I went into psychology because I felt like that was probably the best match for what I really felt called to do. And I kind of had the idea that I might have like a holistic center, you know, like a physical holistic center where people would come in and we'd do like therapy and nutrition and, you know, all the different pieces and kind of bring back together a lot of the things that I was learning had been very separated from each other, but really made sense together because we're one human, you know?
Well, you were seeing the whole thing. It wasn't just like a piece.
Yeah. And so I was searching, I was taking all these classes, trying to find, you know, at the beginning of every semester, I'm like, okay, what are my options? And it would be like forensic psychology. And I'd be like, no, not that. And then it would be like early childhood psychology. I'm like, not really. And then it would be like, you know, psychological disorders and like, you know, schizophrenia and all these like wild things. And I'm like, that's not really what I want to do. Maybe I'm in the wrong major, you know, like maybe I picked this wrong.
I think you were just at a normal university.
Right, exactly. And so then I ended up finding a health psychology class, which I was like, okay, getting warmer, but not really. This is more like medical model applications. So like what else? And then my favorite professor offered a course in positive psychology. And I was just like, hallelujah. this is everything that I've been looking for. This brings it all together. This is what I want to do with my life. And we learned about, well-being and so much, just basically the other side of the spectrum than I was seeing outlined in the other courses that were available at the time. And at the time, it was still a pretty new field. I guess it still is in the spectrum of psychology, and what's available. So I, took that course. We read a lot of books. We did a lot of work around it. We did a lot of research. I actually did some research that got published and was presented at a psychological conference with him. And I was like, what do I do with this? Like, I was so on fire about it. I'm like, what the hell how do I make this a career? What does that look like? And I had planned to get my master's in counseling. And I chose like a 3-2 program to get my master's in counseling.
You knew at a pretty young age, like kind of the road you were going down.
Yeah. But I didn't know. Yeah. But I was like, what do I do with this? And he was like, well, you can be a researcher, or you could, you can do research in this field and maybe write a book or something, or you could do coaching, but there's really no proper recognized, you don't get a master's degree in it. You would get a certification, and you can kind of figure it out on your own as you go. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? So I started doing some research, and a lot of the people I saw who were coaches were like health coaches, fitness coaches, lifestyle, like that kind of nutrition segment of the coaching sphere. And so I was like, because I loved nutrition at the time. I was actually minoring in sustainable food systems. I went to a school that was all women. And also we had a really amazing sustainability program and food studies program.
I love that.
Which was really cool, and such a cool opportunity that I started taking some grad classes and cross-registering just to get some of that in my minor. And I did a summer food farm and sustainability institute in Massachusetts in Amherst, which was really cool. And, I did a lot of different things and was trying to figure out how it all fit together. And I kind of decided at that point, I was like, maybe I will do nutrition coaching, but really it feels more broad than that. Cause I think I would get bored talking about avocado toast and macro and micronutrients all the time,
that just wasn't you wanted to go deeper.
Yeah. I'm like, that's not really what, I could do that, sure. And I'm sure it would be fulfilling and amazing. But for me, I was like, oh, I feel like there's something else for me. And so I ended up doing a coaching certification, and it was a 12-month certification program, very in-depth. We learned all different types of coaching, executive coaching, business coaching for entrepreneurs. We learned about relationship coaching. We learned about health and nutrition coaching. We learned all different types, which felt really good to me, because then I could kind of find where I felt the most resonance. And I started my coaching business. And this was, of course, I worked a full-time job in the middle of that. I graduated from school 2 years earlier than I expected because I was planning to stay for 5, and I ended up going for 3 and graduating with my bachelor's, and then working for a local magazine publishing company, doing ad sales and event planning. Basically what I was doing the whole time was consulting with entrepreneurs though, and helping them to figure out their branding, their messaging, their figuring out how we could create events that would support them getting connected to the audience that we had and helping their businesses grow. So I was learning a lot also about small business and local businesses, and was working with a lot of mission-driven businesses in the area that were more like yoga studios and organic skincare lines and sustainable restaurants and things like that were really my jam, what I connected with. So I started doing that, did that for about a year and a half while I built my coaching business. Well, that's not entirely true. I did it for a year. Then I was like, this isn't what I want to do with my life forever. So I better figure out what I do want to do, which is when I found my coaching program and started that, and then left my full-time job 9 months later. to do coaching full time.
I mean, it's really, first of all, it's super interesting to look back and connect all the dots.
Yeah.
Like you took that one class and then it like, you just kept going. You finished school early, you got into coaching, you had a hunch that like, that's what you wanted to do. And then you're like working with all these executives, not because you thought that you were going to be doing that. It just happened, which was just more training. And it's funny because when I look backwards, I was super interested in spirituality like my whole life, but I didn't know it's almost like identical to your story. I was like, where can I learn about like mysticism and, you know, really deep stuff? And so I went to college and the only thing I could think of was to major in religious studies because like, I didn't think there was another option. So it's just like you with psychology. And then I started taking women's studies classes and loving them. So I took extra classes so I could minor in women's studies and major in theology. And like you, I finished early because I was like blowing through my classes. And then I wanted more too. So I ended up finding a school that I kind of wish I would have found for my undergrad for my master's degree. And it was spiritual psychology. I did not know that existed.
Right.
And it was everything that I wanted. And at the same time, I took a year-long coaching track that went parallel with my master's degree. And it was totally in depth. It was a transformational life coaching 12-month program. And it was incredible. So it's funny, like we both kind of did the same thing. And then I knew that I was going to write books and, you know, coach people and do all that. But I didn't know that at, 18 years old. I just was like following these inner prompts. And I was trying to do the best I could with really not knowing anything.
Right. And I think that is so interesting. One, that we have such a similar track, but two, that when we, feel this inner calling and this inner pull, we often will just you just take one step after the next and we just keep unraveling. And also I think a lot of people feel this way who are trailblazers, right? Who are pioneers in something, who are here to do really great, beautiful work that's unique and different than what currently exists. And so we have to kind of break into the paradigms that exist and learn from them, and then kind of really allow your creativity and your intuition to speak and to mold your path and your trajectory a little bit more than just what you've learned and going by the book. And I think that's where a lot of people feel stuck, is that they don't really know how to connect the creative intuition and take what they've already learned versus reinventing the wheel and use that to create something totally new. And that's sort of their signature soul-led enterprise or business or brand or body of work.
So what do you think it was about you that allowed you to follow your gut and take big chances and take a different path than most people? Was it a person that influenced you, or what was it inside of you that gave you the guts to do that? Because I mean, I know when I went to school and I told people I was a religious studies major, they were like, are you going to be a nun? Like totally stupid. And I was like, I remember saying like, the only thing I want to study is God. Like that's the only thing that was interesting to me. But I was getting so much pressure from like, what, you're just wasting your money. Like, why would you go to school and major in something like that? But I knew, I had my mom on my side who was supportive and always told me to like do my own thing. So it was built into me to be my own person. So that's why I'm curious to know, like, how did you get to that point? Because it's kind of rare.
Yeah, I guess so. I had people in my life who were doing things differently for sure, and who encouraged me to be a critical, free thinker and to be good with like not doing what everybody else was doing. My grandmother made really beautiful jewelry, and she would sell it, across the East Coast and just drive up and down the coast and sell these beautiful beaded earrings and pieces of jewelry. And my grandfather, her husband, was a Zen Buddhist and an elementary school teacher in the public school system, but he kept his like spirituality very separate from his profession. Like no one really knew that about him. Mm-hmm. And I think part of it was probably because of the area we grew up in. People just are very narrow. It's a more rural community. Mm-hmm. So people just, they weren't very forward thinking in that way, mm-hmm. and would probably then only see that versus the impact that he was able to make. Mm-hmm. But he would take it a step further. Like he would also direct musicals and plays for the kids who were in his elementary school, which was really cool. And he did it every 2 or 3 years. He would put on one so that the 5th and 6th graders would be the ones who were really like the leads in the show and all of that, which was really cool. So I saw, people doing things differently, and I was always encouraged to be creative. And I used to put on shows and do like performances, and I'd set up like an art show and charge them admission to come into their own house. And
I love that. I love that. No, but I mean, that's how
so many things
should be. That's so nurturing, and that's so freeing for a child to be able to do stuff like that, you know? And I was hoping you'd bring your grandpa up, because I know we talked about him for a little bit and when you interviewed me. And I mean, first of all, he sounds really cool. And I feel like you were so lucky to have someone like that in your life.
Totally.
And I wanted to ask you before, but I don't know, I didn't. Do you think that deep level of spirituality that he had, his meditation practice and all that, allowed him to be more open and do really cool stuff, like put on these performances with the kids and just think differently?
Totally. Yes. And I also want to say too, that spiritual perspective on my mom's side of the family was also very, like, she was very spiritual. Mm-hmm. She was more, her mom used to tell this story, but they moved, and when she was in like high school or junior high or something, and she used to, as soon as she got her driver's license, she used to drive herself to the church that she wanted to go to every Sunday. And she would just always go. And
is this like daughter, is your mom, is this her parents that we're talking about?
No, this is.
You have this coming from both sides of the family.
Yeah. Isn't that weird and
That's
cool?
That's very cool.
But like my mom's side of the family, the women are super intuitive. It's really wild. They all will get, they've all, except me, I don't have this part of intuition is not my natural way. I have a different way, I think, than they do, but they're very, I can't remember what this is called, but basically they will get like messages in dreams, and family members who have deceased will come to them and be carrying, a baby or signs, or friends who have passed away will come and they'll have like a real conversation with them and they'll remember it. So very, very like intuitive in different ways. And they're all like that, like on my grandmother, my aunt, my mom, all.
That's incredible. That's a gift. That is such a gift. And that same juice is running through your veins.
Yeah. And it's pretty cool.
Differently with you.
Yeah. So and for me, I'm really glad, because I feel like my best expression of intuition tends to be helping other people with what their businesses are supposed to be, like what their soul's work really truly is, and how to bring that to fruition and to life with flow, and not getting caught up in all the shoulds or the mechanics of it, but just like really seeing the vision super clearly and then architecting that. So that's fun. But
do you feel like when you're working with someone, do you feel like you're intuitively picking up on like what their soul really wants, or like what they really should be doing, even if they can't see it?
Yeah, totally.
That's the slam dunk right there. I mean, that's the gift.
Yes. I had a consultation call with someone the other day who was like, I want to start this bow company. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. What is this? Like, why do you want to do that? And she starts talking, and she's telling me about like why she wants to do it and the need that she sees and all this stuff, but really she just wants to be home with her kids more and all this stuff. So by the end of that, like 30 minutes, I had completely given her a totally new, I was like, that's not your business. Here's what your business is actually supposed to be. Here's what will actually give you those outcomes and create those realities. Like, go run with this and come back to me later and we'll figure it out. Like,
I mean, and if you have that gift, then that is ringing true to those people when the words come out of your mouth. Yeah. And that's what makes you great at your job. You know, I mean, all the skills that you have obtained and the years of practice and all of that, but nothing is better than having that intuition and being able to look at someone and be like, you know what, actually, this is what's going on right now, because you know.
Yeah.
And if you've had that for a long time, you know. I mean, I don't even question it anymore because it's like, it's my reality.
Yeah.
So that must be really fun for the people that you work with, because I'm sure you're striking a chord inside of them.
Yeah. It's sort of like we can clear the clutter and get straight to it pretty quickly. Cause I just know, I'm like, that's not really what it's about. What about this?
You know, when we have family members, like the ones you're describing, like my family members too, it's like, that is your DNA. You know, like you can fight it. You can pretend it's not there, but really that's what you're made of. That's the juice inside of you. It's all coming from that like tree down to you, from everyone in your family. And I have intuitive women in my family. My mom was spectacular, a great writer, super spiritual, you know, brilliant, creative. And like some of that trickled into me and I just ran with it because I could see it. And I was so grateful to have people like that in my life. Totally. You know, but you're also really grounded. And so that's another special feature, like to have that intuition, to have that creativity, but also to have business sense and be grounded. And just like my mom said, just good old fashioned common sense. It's kind of rare. So if you can have that combo platter, it's a goddamn blessing.
I agree. I'm very grateful for that.
It's good stuff. So what's next for you?
Well, I think a lot of people are kind of asking this question right now with the whole quarantining and this whole COVID-19 situation. Like, how do I move forward? What's next? But to answer that question, for me right now, I'm really grateful that my year was set up so that my launches are like kind of done. Like my big launches are done now, which is like, thank goodness, because I would not want to be launching my big program right now during this. But what's next for me is just continuing. I feel like I've gotten super clear on the different ways that I serve women over the last year and a half-ish. And I have 3 different ways that I do that are really solid. And so now at this moment, I feel like what's next is really helping the women who are feeling called to start a business or build an even stronger foundation for their business to be able to connect those dots and do that and learn the actual skills and also both the inner and the outer skills of building their business, the practical and the magical, skills of building a soulful business. So that's what's next for me. And then continuing with the podcast, I don't really have anything right now that I'm like, oh, this is like the big thing. Like I'm not feeling
you do
called
retreats and all of that. Like you do programs and you work with people one-on-one. It's all of that.
Yeah. So I'm right now, what I'm excited about because of all of this and the people who are feeling called to start a business is my Soulful Business Academy and welcoming more women into that every month because it's a rolling admission and it's, a 12-month program, but it's really everything that you need to build a really strong foundation for your business and make great money, doing what you love, doing what you're here to do. And so that to me feels really exciting. I'm still we're going through it. And each month I'm creating a new module, like a new training module for the women around a certain area that builds upon the previous month's module. So it's really inclusive. And then we also have live calls as part of that. So they get to ask questions and share what's up and the progress they've made, and any blocks that they're running into. We work through those, and they all learn from each other and find themselves in that beautiful container of sisterhood. And that is so fun and rewarding, because you really do see like that first year in your business can also be so freaking confusing and feel like you're crazy for even doing this. And so to be able to hold that space for those women is really special to me, and feels really important.
It is important, and having a coach is a game changer. When I started my business, I worked with a business coach in London, and I loved her, and she helped me so much, and I was so overwhelmed, and she just made everything easy. We just cut it up into pieces. She was like, okay, now next week we're going to do this. And next thing I knew, I like had a business. Yeah. And so, I mean, not only am I a coach, but working with coaches, it's like, it is so, it just makes life a lot easier and gives you way more clarity. So, I don't know how I would have done it without her, actually, now that I'm thinking back on it. So it's what you're doing is really cool. And like we talked about, you have all these skills and the intuition and all that, and putting all these women together, I can just tell it would be an awesome experience.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool. Every week it's like something new and exciting. And it's really neat to watch them also supporting each other. Like a couple of them have been doing like free webinars and things. And I love seeing that they're supporting each other outside of just our group and our work together, which is, the most awesome thing, like that they're taking action and then they're showing up to support each other and then say like, oh my gosh, I loved that. Good job. I just feel like we don't get enough of that when we're first starting out. A lot of times it's like, my husband thinks I'm crazy and my parents don't get what I'm doing. Right. And all my coworkers don't know. And I feel really uncomfortable with this new identity of what does it mean to be an entrepreneur or business owner? And then what? Like you just get in your own head so much.
That story is as old as the hills, this person thinks I'm crazy. They don't get what I'm doing. And it makes you second guess yourself. So having the support of other people, it's necessary. Let's get real.
Yeah. And the other cool thing about it is that, normally the reason I created this too is because there are so many things that are repetitive that I would have to say to every single person anyway, when they're starting a business, to get it set up, to get the right structures and systems in place, to really get clear on their messaging, to make sure that they have a clear blueprint that also feels fluid and flexible and not super rigid, so that they feel like they're stuck with it. And so the cool part about it is not only do they get all that to kind of go at their own pace throughout, but also they get access to me, like basically one-on-one during our group calls. We do laser coaching. And so that's just like not out. I felt like it was not available or attainable at a price point for people who were just getting started, because you would either have to hire a coach, which is pretty expensive if you're doing like a 6-month one-on-one program, or you have to figure it out on your own. Or you have to do like an e-course, and then there's no accountability. There's no one you can really talk to about it.
No, it's way better to be able to ask questions and have that support from the group. I mean, I've done a couple programs like that, and they were fantastic, and I'm still friends with everybody.
Yeah.
So I know that those programs work. And when you're starting off, it's just, you need the support. You need the support. So Absolutely. Keep on keeping on, because you got to get going.
Thank you. I'm excited.
You should be. Yeah. So I always ask my guests one last question before we end the show. Okay. What is something that you thought you knew for sure, and then you realized, oh my God, I was totally wrong?
Okay. I think for me, I grew up believing that there was like a right way, like that there was a right answer. Like there was always a right answer, that there was always like a better option that was this, superior choice or point of view or whatever. And that's just so not true. No. And that it would come from like knowing a lot, that it would come from like reading the books and doing the things and somewhere outside of myself or outside of another person that like the truth or the right thing is objective versus subjective.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I think that's the thing that I thought I knew that was totally wrong.
That's a big one.
Yeah. What do most people say? Like,
They have all sorts of things, you know,
okay.
it's really like, I thought life was one way, but it was totally the opposite.
Yeah.
And it's only through, you know, having experiences and growing in consciousness and just growing as a person that you realize like, no, I didn't have to live like that. Like I didn't have to do it like my parents did it, or like I didn't have to follow A, B, C, and D rules. It's not that way. It's just like what you said. It doesn't have to be this way. This is the way you do it. There's a billion different ways we can do it. And it's up to us. You know, you're an adult now, so you don't have to listen to anyone or anything. It's like you grow into a person, hopefully, that carves out their own path. And when that starts happening, that's when you say to yourself, oh my God, everything I thought I knew was wrong, because I'm seeing it in a whole different light now. And to me, that's exciting. That's why I named the podcast that, because I had that experience. It just happened to hit me all in one day. But I realized like, oh my God, I'm living by a totally different set of rules than I was before. And this is a new earth. This is a new way. And to me, that was very exciting. It never was boring after that.
Yeah. No, not at all.
Not at all. Well, Emily, thank you so much for being on the show. I really, really appreciate it. I think you are brilliant and beautiful and intuitive and totally cool.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me on. This was so fun.
So fun. I will talk to you soon, and bye to everyone. I'll see you in 2 weeks on the next show. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for joining me this week. If you're digging what I'm throwing down, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts or your favorite listening app. I'll be back next Wednesday with a brand new episode featuring another killer conversation about how to start living a transformed life.